So I started to work on this book project, close to 3 years prior to the pandemic. It's been a topic that I've pursued for nearly 20 years because I was convinced that technology was going to change how we worked, how we connected, and how workforces would be arranged. But never in my wildest dreams did I ever imagine that the whole world would migrate to remote work. And never did I imagine that it would be in the midst of a pandemic. It pains me that this is how it's happened, the virtualization of work. Launches and relaunches have long been established as the way to start a group team in the most effective way by pioneering sociologist Richard Heckman. He was a Harvard sociologist who studied teams in all forms, in all contexts for decades, for about 40 years, and concluded that when you launch a team the right way, meaning you set it up, you are actually creating the conditions for that team to be effective. In fact, they will increase the likelihood of success for teams by 30%, which is significant. So the idea of relaunch is to make sure that we are back realigned, ensuring that we're all focused on our shared goals, that we're all very clear about our capabilities, our contributions, our resources, our constraints, that the norms that we had established are still working for us. So do we need to revise and update given the dynamic nature of all of our lives, and to ensure that there is psychological safety, as my friend and colleague Amy Edmondson would say, in the work team. And I recommend you do this every 6 to 8 weeks or so in a remote group, a remote team, because it's so easy to get derailed when you're not co-located. Trust is one of the most studied elements in virtual work. I'm talking decades worth of work to try to determine, how do you establish trust? How do you maintain trust? What does trust look like when you barely see people in person and have the opportunity to have the water cooler conversations and all the ways that we know we build trust? So there are two types of trusts. The first one is called cognitive trust, which is grounded in the belief and the understanding that others are dependable and have the competencies to be able to collaborate effectively on a common task. The second type of trust is called emotional trust, and it's grounded in the belief that others have care and concern for us. Now, leaders and managers must ensure that they're developing emotional trust with the people that they're working with. People need to know that their managers and the leaders care about them. The cognitive trust you can almost confer right away. And in virtual work, the term for this is actually swift trust. Once I know you've got the qualifications to do the work, and once I know that you're dependable, that you're reliable, I will give you trust and we can get to working. Swift trust. But emotional trust takes much longer to develop, requires empathy, requires self-disclosure and spending time with people. And it is the thing that has this big temporal dimension. Time is really important for that second type of trust. It's incumbent upon organizations to find ways to retain women. It's a loss that's going to be incredibly difficult to revert. We already know that diversity is a challenge and an issue and a concern for many organizations. We know this. So if people are struggling to meet their professional demands because of the challenges and the demands across other parts of their lives, then we need to take the gifts that remote work gives us, like flex time. Another thing to consider, some of the smart companies that I've had the pleasure of working with over the last 12 months have tried to truly understand the whole person. And what that means is try to see what they can set up between certain hours of the day when families, for example, with children have gap times. What activities can the companies actually put in place to help parents and families? Listen, the world has changed. We're using our home furniture. We're using our home Wi-Fi. We are participating in a professional environment from our homes. It only makes sense that organizations help facilitate that for us as we continue to serve people. So the first thing you want to do is survey your employees to truly understand their preferences in terms of how they want to see their work arrangements post-COVID, meaning do they want 1 or 2 days a week of remote work? Do they want remote work full-time? Do they want nothing to do with remote work? What do they really want? And these surveys should be collected anonymously so that we truly have a real picture of what people want. And once you understand that, you want to develop policy that looks at what is this hybrid model, if you decide to move in this direction, that includes remote work, in-person work. What does that look like for us, given the critical tasks that we need to accomplish in our organization, given our stakeholders, and given kind of the rhythm, the cadence of work that we want to achieve? So for some, it's giving people full freedom. You can come in and out based on the work that we do. For some, we actually want people in on these specific 2 days a week to ensure that we have co-located times. For others, it's work for 2 weeks remotely and then come in for 2 weeks remotely. There are those who are making those types of policies. You also need to articulate your revised cultural norms. The culture of your organization has newly changed. So what is our cultural norms? Meaning, what are the appropriate behaviors that we want to espouse to maintain the type of culture that is right for us? And then, of course, you want to make sure that you're upskilling your entire workforce on remote work and digital mindset competencies. And in many instances, depending on your size, you may want to consider adding the role of a chief remote officer to the C-suite to ensure that there's oversight across the entire workforce on systems, structures, processes, culture, people, training, and that all of these pieces are not only aligned, but they are part of the executives level work, and that everyone is ensuring that they're participating in that work at the leadership levels. I would say that I was reminded about how disciplined we have to be in ensuring that our work and non-work lives are not blurring to the extent that our well-being is under attack. To ensure that we're disciplined and thoughtful about the digital tools that we're using to do work, as opposed to ad hoc decisions on whether this is a synchronous conversation, asynchronous conversation, whether we're using lean or rich media, to ensure that we're disciplined about those things in order to avoid not only tech exhaustion, but in order to work smart. In some instances, we need to capture, store, and reuse our communication events. If we use, video conferencing, live video conferencing without thoughtfully thinking about those things if we use the phone when in fact we want to capture, store, and reuse whatever we're working on, we would make different digital choices. Leaders have to be disciplined in that you don't want to confuse people by saying, we want your well-being, we care about your well-being, but yet you're sending emails at all hours of the night and weekend without making clear, please don't respond until Monday morning, but you've sent 8 emails throughout the weekend. That's confusing. That's mixed signals. So the discipline part is incredibly important. Many people are concerned about the change that remote work might bring to their culture. But the reality is that change has already happened by the sheer fact that we are now operating remotely. And what culture means what's our shared values and what are our shared norms, meaning what are the appropriate behaviors and attitudes that we espouse in our organization. And remote work and virtuality has shifted our norms of working and what's appropriate. How do we make decisions? How do we connect? How do we problem solve? It's shifted all of that. So the culture has already changed. And the thing to do now is, how will you revise or update your culture so that people can thrive in a remote environment and adapt to this new world? Holding on to what was before, I think, is how people are going to get in trouble. I think we need to be forward thinking, embrace the things that we love, change the things that we don't, and accept the fact that our cultures as we know them have changed forever.